Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Don't Write Like a Scientist. My name is Kristin Sainani, and I'm an associate professor at Stanford University, where I teach both statistics and writing. I also write about health and science for general audiences, and I teach the popular massive open online course, Writing in the Sciences, on Coursera.
Hi, everyone. I'm Regina Nuzzo. I'm a professor teaching statistics at Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C. I'm also senior advisor for stats communication at the American Statistical Association. And like Kristin, I write about science, health, medicine, statistics for lots of different audiences, including newspapers and magazines. So a little background first. Kristin and I have actually been friends since we were grad students at Stanford many years ago. I won't tell you how many years ago. And we both love writing, and we love teaching, and we love helping people learn how to write better. And every time we get together, we have conversations about writing. So what we thought we would do today is have a conversation. She and I are going to be talking about how we each took a different piece of writing from the scientific literature and improved it. So we're writing about science without sounding like a typical scientist. So first, a couple of housekeeping things. There's a chat, which I see you all have found already because it's coming through. So great. Hello, everyone. It's 7 in the morning here, 4 in the morning for Kristin. So send her a virtual cup of coffee. You can also, as you've also found, the little emoticon thingies down at the bottom. Great. If you have a question, so we encourage you to do that. If you have a question you'd like to make sure that we address or a comment during the Q&A at the end, please put it in the questions tab, not in the chat, because the chat is apparently quite lively and active and we might miss it. And I think that's it for the housekeeping, but first we have a short message from our sponsors that Kristin is going to read.
All right, thanks, Regina. Hey, thank you, Marissa. All right, so just going to start with a word from our sponsors here. Editage is the world's largest provider of specialist scientific communication solutions to researchers, publishers, academic societies, institutions, libraries, and corporations worldwide. Their global team comprises editors, linguists, trainers, research communicators, and publication support experts with specialized backgrounds and rich work experience. They deliver personalized services from 3,000 plus experts and cover 1,300 plus academic subjects and all types of academic documents. Editage now brings you Researcher.life, an ecosystem of products and services curated for researchers across the globe in all stages of research. All right, so that brings us to our webinar. Sorry for the delay. Don't write like a typical scientist. And we're going to try to teach you some tricks here today for not writing like a typical scientist. So what we're going to do today actually is we're going to take 2 typical scientific abstracts from the literature, real examples, and we're going to edit them to make them more well written. So your typical scientific abstract tends to be very dense, full of jargon, unnecessarily wordy, and hard to read. We're going to show you how to clean it up and make it a more well-written scientific abstract that will appeal to a broader audience. All right, so just going to do a little preview here of the abstracts that we're going to go over. I chose, and I'll read through the whole thing in a minute, so don't try to read it right now. I chose an abstract from the journal Foods. It's about snack food in children, relevant to my life because I have kids who love snack food. Here's the original, and I'm going to show you how I edited it into a more crisp and readable version. Regina, what do you have for us?
I have something less exciting than snack food, but happens to us every day. Traffic congestion from a study in the journal Sensors. And this is my original. And then we're going to have the nice edited version there. So I feel like we're going to cover lots of different angles between the two of us.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm going to start now by just reading through this, and then we'll talk about it. So it says food processing is used for transforming whole food ingredients into food commodities or edible products. This research characterizes the choices, consumption, and taste preferences of adolescents who were offered Apple snack food items that varied along a processing level continuum, unprocessed, minimally processed, processed, and ultra-processed. A cross-sectional study was implemented in 4 elementary school classrooms utilizing a buffet of Apple snack food items from the aforementioned 4 food processing categories. The survey was administered to measure students' taste acceptance of the snacks. The study found that students selected significantly greater quantities of ultra-processed snack foods compared to minimally processed and unprocessed snack foods. The students enjoyed the taste of ultra-processed snack foods significantly more than minimally processed and unprocessed snack foods. In conclusion, it was found that as processing levels increase in Apple snack foods, they become more appealing and more heavily consumed by elementary school students. If applied broadly to snack foods, this conclusion presents one possible explanation regarding the high level of diet-related diseases and nutrient deficiencies across adolescents in America. Okay, Regina, what do you think?
You know what? I love eating. I love apples. But this just felt like I had no idea what was going on. I fell asleep, I have to say. And, it feels like it was a little more complicated than it needed to be. Like did it really need to be so hard to understand? That would be my bottom line.
Exactly. I mean, one of the reasons that I picked this one is because I think it has some interesting science. I actually am a skeptic on lots of studies, but I totally believe the results of this study based on my own children. But we have a tendency in science to overcomplicate the language. And I feel like this is a really great example of overcomplicating things, right? Because this is about snack foods. It's not about quantum physics. And there's no reason we need to overcomplicate snack foods.
I agree.
All right. So just for fun here, I made a little video of myself editing this particular abstract in track changes. This is sped up, by the way. I cannot actually edit this fast.
I wish I could.
I know. Wouldn't it be great if we could edit this fast, Regina? That would make our lives much more efficient. But main point on that is you can just see how much red appeared there. That's all the areas where I was able to cut clutter. And we're going to talk in a minute about cutting clutter. But here is my edited version, and I'll read through this now. To test the hypothesis that children's food preferences are affected by food processing, we offered 97 students from 4 fourth grade classrooms a buffet of increasingly processed apple snacks: raw apple slices, unprocessed; dried apples, minimally processed; applesauce, processed; and gummy fruit snacks, ultra-processed. Students selected a mean 2.2 servings of the ultra-processed snack foods, which was significantly greater than the means for processed, minimally processed, and unprocessed snack foods. Students also enjoyed the taste of ultra-processed snack foods significantly more than the other foods on a 0 to 3 scale, where 3 equals loved it. Students rated the ultra-processed food a mean of 2.7 versus 2.5 for processed, 1.9 for minimally processed, and 2.3 for unprocessed snack foods. Our finding that children prefer more highly processed foods may help explain the high level of diet-related diseases in children in America. All right, what do you think, Regina?
So I didn't fall asleep for this one. I feel like it's good. I got the point right away. I think you really worked magic on this. And there's so much of what you did that I like, but I think my favorite is that you gave these, like you explained exactly what unprocessed and minimally processed. You gave examples of the type of food, and that really stuck in my head, made it concrete. But there's so much here, so I can't wait to see what you did.
We're going to unpack it all in a minute, but actually you picked up on something that as soon as I read this abstract, it was very vague in my head what everybody was talking about, what the authors here were talking about. So when you talk about unprocessed and processed categories, right? Well, what does that mean? And so one of the first things I did was I skimmed through the full text to figure out what foods are we talking about. And once I realized it was these, gummy fruit snacks, which by the way, my children absolutely love. They come in little packages and they're very yummy, mostly sugar, I think. Once I had those specifics, it actually helped me to understand the study. So then by putting those specifics in for the reader, I think that gives the reader a concrete picture of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But I'm going to talk now about some of the steps I went through in the editing process and sort of unpack how I got from that original to that edited version. So one of the main things that I did was actually to cut clutter. There was a lot of clutter. You could probably hear it, right, when I was reading that out loud. I'm going to start just with the very first sentence here. It says, again, food processing is used for transforming whole food ingredients into food commodities or edible products. What do you think, Regina?
Like, I don't know what this means. Food commodities feels like something that you're trading on the stock market, maybe like pork bellies, food commodities. I don't know what they're talking about here.
Right, it's kind of vague, right? I mean, I have a concept of what food processing is already in my head. And when I read this sentence, it didn't actually enlighten me at all about food processing. It didn't add to my understanding of food processing. And the reason is that it contains a lot of empty words and phrases, as you pointed out. Food commodities. Well, that's really vague. What does that mean? Yeah, is that something we trade on the stock market?
Yeah.
Whole food ingredients. Well, that's very general and vague. Edible products. Well, that could mean, a very wide variety of things. So since this is so vague and kind of amorphous, I can't really get much out of it. It's not concrete enough. And these kinds of blobby or empty words and phrases, I like to present a visual because a few years ago I discovered there's this creature called a blobfish, and I think it's a really good visual for blobby words and phrases such as whole food ingredients or food commodities. And actually I have children who are learning to write, and then we got a little stuffed blobfish. So in my house, when they write things that are very blobby and vague, like the book was interesting, I bring out the blobfish to remind them to be more concrete, not to use empty, meaningless words and phrases. So what did I do here? I actually cut that entire sentence because it didn't add anything for me. So I figured it's not necessary. We'll just get rid of it.
I support that.
Thanks, Regina. All right, I cut some other clutter in the middle, but just for time's sake, I'm going to actually scroll down now to those final two sentences. And what I'm going to do here is actually to wander through this word by word and actually show you all of the items that I cut. So let me read it again here, and then I'll show you word by word. In conclusion, it was found that as processing levels increase in Apple snack foods, they become more appealing and more heavily consumed by elementary school students. If applied broadly to snack foods, this conclusion presents one possible explanation regarding the high level of diet-related diseases and nutrient deficiencies across adolescents in America. You can hear how wordy that is when I read it out loud, right?
Yeah, that doesn't, and I want you, like, it's not zippy. I want zippy. I want something there.
It's not zippy. Yeah, and this is like the really important part because it's the conclusion of the study and an implication from the study, but it's kind of lost, it's drowned out in all those extra words. So let's see what we can cut. It says, in conclusion, it was found that. All right. This is kind of a long-winded way to get going on a sentence. Regina, do you notice that a lot of scientists like to put these kind of wordy phrases at the beginning?
A lot of scientists do, and I find myself doing it too. I'm guilty of this. I feel like it's throat clearing, right? While I'm trying to figure out what to say, like, in conclusion. And I'm guilty of it too.
That is a great description. Yeah, it's kind of throat clearing at the beginning of a sentence where you are trying to figure out what you're trying to say. We all do it on a first draft, but we got to learn to go back and cut it out. So I'm just going to condense this and say, we found that as processing levels increase. And actually that we found that construction is a really good little signpost to your reader that, hey, I'm about to deliver the main conclusions of the study. So we found that. You can never go wrong with that when presenting conclusions. And then we get this kind of awkward, as processing levels increase in Apple snack foods, they become more appealing and more heavily consumed by elementary school students. Sounds awkward, right, when I read that out loud?
Yeah. I'm not, like, why is the students are the ones that are doing the eating, so why is it feels a little backwards, right? Like, more appealing, more consumed. Just say what it is you want to say.
Right. It feels like the children should be at the beginning and not at the end of that sentence. And so again, this is the main conclusion of the study. I wanted to get it a little more zippy, as you say. So I just cut all of this and replaced it with, we found that children prefer more highly processed foods. I think that captures it. And then we get this, if applied broadly to snack foods. I feel like this is another little throat clearing at the beginning of the sentence. Scientists sometimes feel like they got to put a transition in for every sentence, and actually you don't really need that. I understand what the authors were trying to do here. They were trying to say, hey, we're aware that we only studied apple snack foods and it might not apply to all snack foods. But I think the reader can infer that. I don't think we need this, so I'm just going to get rid of it altogether.
I feel like we overdo sometimes the transitions, like a little bit. Yes, the signposting can be helpful, but when we overdo it at the beginning of every sentence, we're not trusting our readers enough to be able to follow the line of logic.
I totally agree. I mean, I see this all the time in scientific writing, that like almost every sentence starts with some kind of transition.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're right. You should be relying on the logic and trusting your reader to follow that logic. And if the reader can't follow, it might be your logic that's problematic.
Right.
So then we get, this conclusion presents one possible explanation regarding, and I'm going to highlight that phrase there because I think this is really typifies your typical academic writing, right? We use a lot of words and some pretty big words for a very, very tiny idea. Right? What do we mean by presents one explanation regarding? Well, there's a faster way to say that, right? Can't we just say this conclusion may help explain? So why use all these big words and extra words when you just mean may help explain? Notice that these words are not the important words of the sentence. This has nothing to do with, the main findings of the study. This is just kind of filler words. So we want to keep them as short as possible. So we get, this conclusion may help explain the high level of diet-related diseases and nutrient deficiencies. Now, I don't know if you caught that, but I think there's a little bit of a repetition there, right? To me, a nutrient deficiency is a specific type of diet-related disease, so we don't need both. We can just cut one of those. And then we get this across adolescence in America, and something about that preposition there. Across isn't quite the right preposition. I would prefer in adolescence. But actually, this turns out this study was in fourth graders who are 9 to 10 years old. I don't call those adolescents. I call those children. So I fixed that to in children in America. So this boils down to, we found that children prefer more highly processed snack foods. This conclusion may help explain the high level of diet-related diseases in children in America. I'll tell you, right?
Yeah, this is nice. It summarizes it quickly. I mean, you lost some words in there. We lost, the word appealing or whatever, but this is just summarizing everything that you've done. And so you didn't need those extra words in here. You summarized it very succinctly.
Yeah, exactly. This is a nice now quick summary of what's the main conclusion of the study and what's the main implication. But I think we can actually do slightly better if we're paying really close attention, because you might notice that the second sentence starts with this conclusion, but that's just referring to the conclusion that was actually given at the end of the last sentence.
Right.
So if you want to make this even tighter, you can merge those two sentences so you don't have that repetition. So what I did is just to say, our finding that children prefer more highly processed snack foods may help explain the high level of diet-related diseases in children in America.
Perfect.
Tighter, right? Yeah. And there's lots of other clutter that I cut here. So just as a visual, I'm not going to go through it all, but on the left-hand side of the screen, I highlighted everywhere that I thought there was a lot of clutter. And my track changes are on the right-hand side of the screen. And you can see that all of those yellow areas, those highlighted areas, became red because I was able to cut a lot of material. So that's one of the key tips for cleaning up your writing, is just to cut all that extra clutter. It always comes in on a first draft. I don't know about you, Regina, but on a first draft, I often end up with a lot of clutter because I'm just trying to get my thoughts out.
Yeah.
Gotta go back and clean it up.
Yeah.
All right. Second thing I want to point out besides the clutter is I want to point out that there was a fair amount of passive voice in this abstract, and that's common in science to have passive voice. So this is things like food processing is used for. Notice it doesn't say who used the food processing, or a cross-sectional study was implemented in. Again, doesn't say who implemented the cross-sectional study. A survey was administered. Doesn't say who administered the survey. And passive voice, by the way, notice that all those highlighted areas up there have a to be verb, is or was. That's a little flag that you might have slipped into passive voice. Passive voice is awkward, right? It's not the way we talk. I don't go around and saying, a survey was administered, right? I say, we administered a survey, or I administered a survey. And so it's hard on the reader just because it tends to make your prose more wordy, and it hides, the subject, the person doing the action. And it's just also not the way we talk. It's not conversational. And so that makes it sound stilted and awkward. And so when I was cleaning this up, in fact, in cutting clutter, I ended up cutting a lot of that passive voice. Turned out a lot of those passive voice constructions, I didn't need any of the words around them either. So I just got rid of it. The one sentence that I kind of kept in was the one that says a cross-sectional study was implemented in 4 elementary school classrooms. I edited this quite a bit, but I kept in the gist of this sentence. And so what I did is I changed it. First of all, I didn't think we needed to say it was a cross-sectional study, because if you describe the study, it's obvious that it's cross-sectional. So I got rid of that detail. And I just said, we offered 97 students a buffet of Apple snack food items. And that way now we're in the active voice. I had to use we, because who did the offering or the implementing? That's we. That's the study authors. And Regina, do you ever get the question about we and I?
I do. And in fact, I've been watching the chat and people have been talking about this. Are we actually allowed to use the word we in academic writing? And people ask me this all the time. You've probably done the same thing. I've talked to publishers, editors of scientific journals and ask them, can we use that first person voice, that we or I, or do we need to use passive voice? And they have all told me, do not use passive voice. The recommendations are to use active voice, and that means using first person if necessary. So we is fine. You find the same thing with when you
totally agree. First of all, anytime I talk about active and passive voice, I always get this question, sounds like this is no exception, that, wait, I was told I can't use personal pronouns. So I don't know where that myth came from. It's usually, I always say to people, where did you hear that? My advisor. Well, your advisor might have done it wrong for a long time. I've talked to lots of editors. If you go look at the instructions actually in journals, they often will say explicitly, please use the active voice and personal pronouns, and they'll actually want you to do that because editors know that it's easier to read. My favorite example, though, that I always like to offer is Watson and Crick's famous 1953 paper on the structure of DNA. That paper actually starts, we wish to suggest. And so they actually start with the word we. It's good enough for Watson and Crick. It's good enough for us.
I feel like it, and I'm not sure where this myth got started, because when you look back at academic writing from 40 years ago, people used I and we. I mean, they're not saying giving personal emotions. We were happy, we were thrilled. That's not the kind of first person we're talking about bringing in. But using we conducted this experiment. We offered 97 students. This is fine. So I feel like, Kristin, you and I need to bust this myth and bring back that old school style.
Absolutely.
Right here.
All right. So besides passive voice, another little tip when you're cleaning up your scientific writing is to make sure you have all the details that you need. Don't be too vague. So for example, I thought this abstract was actually missing quite a few details. I had to go skim the paper for some key details. They say in describing the study, a cross-sectional study was implemented in 4 elementary school classrooms, but they never told us which grades in elementary school. And I think that matters here because elementary school is kindergarten to 5th grade. And I'm going to feel differently about the study if it's 5th graders versus, kindergartners. And then they never told us how many students.
Sample size, right? How many? Give me some of these details. I feel like, statisticians, we need the sample size. We need to know what's going on here. They left it out.
We're both statisticians, and I think first thing we want to know is, well, how big was your sample size, right? So in my rewrite, I said we offered 97 students, to specify the number, from 4 4th grade classrooms. That would be kids that are 9 to 10 years old. Another missing detail that we talked about already, actually, that you brought up, Regina, was in the original, they talked about these 4 food processing categories, and they said there was a buffet of Apple snack items from these 4 categories, but they never told us what specific foods there were. And I feel like that was a key detail that until I knew what the foods were, I couldn't really picture the study.
Yeah.
So in my rewrite, I added those foods back. Raw apple slices unprocessed, dried apples minimally processed, applesauce processed, and gummy fruit snacks ultra processed. And the authors really wanted to get across these 4 food processing categories, so I didn't drop that. They thought that was important, but I wanted to tie those categories to the specific foods. All right, last one. You might have noticed when I was reading through the original, it says the students enjoyed the taste of the ultra-processed snack foods, mean of 2.72, and actually, they never tell us, what does 2.72 mean? They never told us the scale here. Did you notice that, Regina?
This frustrates me. It's one of my pet peeves because 2.72 out of 3 is very different than 2.72 out of 100. Like, did they love it or did they hate it? You need the context here, and they left it out. I can't believe that.
Yeah, I see this frequently. Actually, I was just reviewing a paper the other day where they were talking about some survey results, and they put the means in, but no scale. So I was like, well, I don't know what that means. Is 2.72 out of 3, in which case it would be very high? Or is 2.72 out of 100, right, which would not be high, right? So I added this back in. And actually, I'll just point out here that in adding this information back in, I actually expanded the text. I made the text longer, but that's okay because since I had cut all those unnecessary, useless words, I had plenty of room to put back in this key information. So I said, students also enjoyed the taste of ultra-processed snack foods significantly more than the other foods on a 0 to 3 scale, where 3 equals loved it. My kids would absolutely rate these gummy fruit snacks as a 3. They are quite yummy.
I love them. I have to say, I love them.
I do end up eating them myself sometimes, although I'm not sure they really qualify as any type of fruit. I think they're mostly just sugar and probably are more akin to candy. All right. So that brings us back to my edited version. Again, trying to show you some of the steps of how I got from the original to here. But I'm going to stop sharing now. And Regina, I'd love to see what you have.
Excellent. All right. Let's fingers crossed that we've
technical
got
difficulty.
What do you think? Is it working?
That looks good to me. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So thank you for that. So we are going to be moving on to traffic congestion. This is from a study in sensors, and I'm just going to read it, Kristin, and then you give me your opinion of it. Traffic congestion is, on a daily basis, responsible for a significant amount of economic and social costs. One of the critical examples is the obstruction of priority vehicles during fast trajectories, which potentially cost lives and property in case of delay that is too great. By means of visual sensing methods, solutions and schedules have already been proposed for adjusting traffic light sequences depending on a priority vehicle's position. However, these mechanisms are computation and power intensive. Deploying and powering a large-scale network will have a crucial economical cost. Furthermore, these devices will not always have access to sufficient power. To provide a solution, we developed an acoustic and self-powered device that can detect priority vehicles and can be cost-effectively deployed to define a sensor network. The device combines the detection of priority vehicles and the harvesting of sound energy through triboelectrification. This paper will introduce the use of triboelectric energy harvesting, specifically in a self-powered wireless sensor network for priority vehicle detection. Furthermore, it shows how to increase the power performance of such a generator. Finally, the results are analyzed. All right, what do you think? Thoughts?
Wow. Okay. I have to admit, I really struggled to understand what they're talking about here. Maybe it's because I'm not a sensor engineer, but I didn't get much out of this. I got that we're talking about traffic, and then there was something about a network and computational power. And then I got that some results were analyzed, and I have to say I didn't get too much out of this. So I'm hoping you can unpack it for us.
Right. You kind of got the beginning, one line in the middle, and then the end. You know, that's why I actually picked this one, is because the ideas underneath it are quite cool. They're really neat. But I feel like the writing obscured the ideas a little bit. And I wanted to see if I could just change this slightly, just improve it to bring those ideas to the forefront. So there are many ways to rewrite this, of course, but this is one of the ones. This is how I approached it. You can see on my red all the changes I made. Here's the edited version. When traffic congestion obstructs priority vehicles such as ambulances and police cars, lives and property may be lost. To clear roadways for these priority vehicles, researchers have proposed mechanisms that adjust traffic light sequences by visually sensing where a priority vehicle is. However, these solutions would require too much expensive computation and power to be practical in a large-scale network. To solve these problems, we developed a self-powered device that can acoustically detect priority vehicles and harvest their sound energy through triboelectrification. In this paper, we will introduce the mechanism and its methodology, show how to further increase its power performance, and share results that we analyzed.
Wow, I love that. I feel like I understand it now, so thank you. Yeah, I think this just feels so much more concrete, and I get it. As soon as you said ambulances and police cars, I think a little light bulb went off in my head. Because in the original, they were talking about priority vehicles. And even though I probably should have guessed that priority vehicles meant ambulances and police cars, it was so abstract that I didn't really see in my head ambulances and police cars. The minute you said that, I was like, oh, we're talking about getting that speeding ambulance with the sick person to the hospital quickly. Oh, okay. Now I know what even the problem is. And then I was able to understand their solution as well. So this is really nice. And I'm looking forward to seeing how you got from the first version to the second version.
Right. So I want to point out, I don't think that I dumbed this down. You know, sometimes scientists say, well, you can't lose all this information. I feel like by simplifying the language, I was able to bring the researchers' ideas. This is not about dumbing it down or making something easier like that. Okay.
Regina, you actually made me feel, smarter, because I felt like I actually got it. When I read the first one, I felt dumb, right? Because I'm like, I don't follow this.
Exactly. Right? And even if we're writing for an academic audience, we want a broad academic audience to appreciate our writing, not just, the 3 people that know exactly what we've already done because we've seen them at all the conferences. We want to be broadly accessible. Okay, so I'm going to go through like you and pick out just a few things and walk you through my thought process. First 2 sentences. Traffic congestion is, on a daily basis, responsible for a significant amount of economic and social cost. One of the critical examples is the obstruction of priority vehicles during fast trajectories, which potentially cost lives and property in case of delay that is too great. So first thing I did, same as you, go through, find those blobfish in the words and phrases that don't add much. You probably found a lot going through.
I think you can hear that there's a lot of words, especially when you read that out loud. A lot of words in there floating around that maybe we don't need. I think the one that really jumped out at me, though, is fast trajectories. This strikes me as just very typical academic speak, right?
Yeah.
Because I think if I step back for a minute, I think what they're talking about is like speeding cars or, speeding ambulances. Like O.J. Simpson and the white Bronco speeding down the LA freeway. But when you say fast trajectories, it totally obscures speeding cars. And so I didn't, get that right away. I have to really stop and think about it.
Right. It sounds a little like a rocket trajectory or geometry or something. Okay, but I found plenty before that. So hang on to that one. First one I found was on a daily basis. Traffic congestion is on a daily basis responsible for. So I read this, it's a sort of thing that I would write myself. But when I go back the second time, look at it and say, don't I already know that traffic congestion happens every day? Don't you?
Right, I kind of assume
in California
happening on a daily basis.
Have traffic every day. It would be nice if it were only on Saturdays, but it is not. It is every day. So I would go through and say, do I lose anything if I cut this out? Traffic congestion is responsible for. I don't lose anything. Let's get rid of it. If it's not adding something, it's just taking up word count. And since you sometimes have a really strict word count for abstracts, let's save it for the important information. All right, second one I found, responsible for a significant amount of economic and social costs. Again, something typical that I would write because I'm trying to really impress the readers how important this is. It's a significant amount of economic and social cost. But this is where when I think about it, would I really be writing about this if it were an insignificant amount of economic and social costs, right? It's responsible for this tiny, trivial, not important economic social cost. So again, do I lose anything if I get rid of this? Traffic congestion is responsible for economic and social costs. I think it's okay. I'm not losing anything there. Next one, very similar, critical. One of the critical examples, again, would I be talking about this if it were not a critical example? One of the trivial, non-important, by the way, but I'm going to write about it here. No, let's go ahead and just say one of the examples is the obstruction of priority vehicles during fast trajectories. Kristin, your favorite. So I know you said this is academic speak, and maybe we could rewrite this more simply, but I would argue here that we probably don't even need it. It's that same kind of not adding much, because priority vehicle emergency during a slow trajectory, probably not.
It's not an emergency if the ambulance is going slowly, right?
Right. So we can assume that if a priority vehicle, it's going quickly, and we're not losing anything by cutting that out. Last but not least, which potentially costs lives and property in case of delay that is too great. In case of delay that is not too great, like again, like I see what they're doing, and it's the sort of thing that I would do. And sometimes, you do want to have this, but when I cross it out, I say, am I losing anything? I'm not losing anything. Traffic congestion is responsible for economic and social costs. One example is the obstruction of priority vehicles, which potentially cost lives and property. I've gotten more directly to the point here and not lost anything for cutting out those things.
Feels so much cleaner.
Yeah. Okay, but not done. I love cleaning out the junk drawer, but you want to keep going. So the next thing I looked for is repetition, because sometimes when you clean things out, clean out that junk drawer, you realize you have too many rubber bands, like lots of rubber bands, lots of repetition. So I found repetition here. Traffic congestion is responsible for economic and social costs, which potentially cost lives and property. Did you even notice going through?
I didn't notice that repetition when you read it the first time. I think it was just buried in so much clutter. But now that you point out, economic and social costs, same thing as cost lives and property. Right.
So let's see if we can combine that. Traffic congestion causes the obstruction of priority vehicles, which potentially cost lives and property.
Much better.
All right. Okay. I like it. I like where we're going on this. Now I want to point out weak verbs, which is something that you also talked about, causes the obstruction of, and I think you had one that was provides an explanation.
Presents an explanation of same construction. Yep.
Right. Same thing. So you've got this this word obstruction, this abstract noun that really has a verb kind of buried inside it, right? Obstruction. What is the verb actually there? It's obstructs. So let's just go ahead. We save words by just replacing it with the verb, but also we just make it more vigorous, right? More powerful. It's going. Traffic congestion obstructs priority vehicles, which potentially cost lives and property. When I do that, I notice that I'm kind of hiding things here. I'm burying the important action. I really want to point to the fact that we're losing lives and property, but I have it here where it's, it's a little awkward. So what I like to do there is just rewrite it to bring that cause and effect to the front. When traffic congestion obstructs priority vehicles, lives and property may be lost.
Nice. I like it. Yeah, that's a much zippier construction.
Yes, it is. And I feel like when we write about science, we need that cause and effect. So we need to really bring that to the forefront. And you know what this does? You get room for the good details. Once you've cleaned out the junk drawer, you can put more stuff in it, the important stuff, your favorite priority vehicles, such as ambulances and police cars. So when traffic congestion obstructs priority vehicles, such as ambulances and police cars, lives and property may be lost.
I love it. Yeah, that's so much better. And you know, the nice thing about cleaning up writing is, I don't know about you, but my junk drawer gets really messy again really fast. The writing stays nice and clean. I don't get more rubber bands in the junk drawer.
It is more satisfying, isn't it?
Yes,
it's nice. Okay, so the weak verbs, these are some of my favorite things to clean up. So I just wanted to highlight another place where I found this. And this is here. To provide a solution, the device combines the detection of priority vehicles and the harvesting of sound energy. So there are actually 3 of these kind of awkward abstract nouns here. I don't know if you can spot them all. They're what I like to call zombie nouns, and they often have this verb with an ION, right? Like solution. And the idea is that you just want to bring that verb back to life by finding the verb that's at the heart of that abstract noun and bring it forward to solve this problem instead of provide a solution. Combined the detection of, we don't need that. We can just say detects. The device detects priority vehicles and the harvesting of sound energy. Do we really need to say the harvesting of sound energy? Let's just say, to solve this problem, the device detect priority vehicles and then harvest their sound energy.
Much cleaner, much nicer.
Yeah. Okay. The last one, passive voice, same as what you had. The results are analyzed. I love it.
I see this one a lot in the writing, you know, and I feel like this is every researcher's dream, right? The data are analyzed. They just magically analyze themselves. You don't need a statistician. You don't need to code in R, right? Wouldn't that be great if the data just analyze themselves? Right.
Well, we don't actually want that, Kristin, because we're statisticians. So
job security. Yeah.
Right. Everyone hire more statisticians, not fewer. Okay. So, who analyzed the results? We analyzed the results. And I think it's important to kind of focus on this. So you talked about how it's cognitively easier for the reader when we're introducing that we in there, or the active voice. I wanted to point out another reason here. I think it's important to take responsibility for the actions that you took during the research process. So we analyzed the results. We made analytic decisions. We eliminated the outliers, right? We contacted the patients, bringing in the fact that there are actual people that are doing this. I feel like is important, kind of philosophically, ethically, and philosophically too. I think it's good for us to remember that there are humans that are doing the scientific research process.
Right. So, I totally agree. There's a sense of taking responsibility. It reminds yourself that, you know, I analyzed the results. I made analytic decisions that could have affected the results. So there's something about putting in an active voice and using those personal pronouns that actually allows you to claim responsibility for what you did and reminds both yourself and the reader that, yeah, humans were involved.
So if you notice, politicians love passive voice in government. You know, mistakes were made. Something bad happened, right? And I think that's a clear sign that it's easy to kind of escape responsibility. And it's not that you're doing anything illegal, but bringing yourself to the forefront is better. So there we go. So I had my original magically edited itself, the edited version. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to kind of summarize the tips, Kristin, that you and I talked about today. There's lots of them. We talked about lots of different things, but there are 4 main ones. First is cutting clutter, eliminating those blobfish, going through and saying, does this word or phrase really add anything? What happens if I get rid of it? Is it just as good? Once you clean out that clutter, you have room to put in the important details that you want in there, like the concrete examples or the little things that you might have overlooked. You want to go through and find all those awkward zombie nouns that have the verbs hidden inside and replace them with their original verbs when you can. just to make it a little stronger, and to write with strong verbs and active voice when you can. It's better for your readers, and journal editors actually want that. There we go. Thank you. I think we can open it up for
yeah, we have about 10 minutes for questions. So I'm going to just start by grabbing, a few from the chat. We have tons of questions, so we won't be able to get to them all. But hopefully we'll answer, some of your questions in passing. I'm going to start with one on passive voice, since we talked a lot about that, from Yulia. She says, passive voice helps to show objectivity and hide the authors for the sake of double-blind peer review to secure open access. So that's a great question, Yulia. I think, though, when you use we or I, that's actually not going to reveal your identity. So usually in double-blind peer review, if there's anything that's identifying, like the names of the institutions, for example, they will actually black that out for you so that it keeps it double-blind. In terms of showing objectivity, I think that's actually one of the reasons people give to argue that, hey, I've got to use passive voice because I want to be objective. I would argue, though, that that's kind of a false sense of security on objectivity, right? It doesn't make you more objective to write in the passive voice. It doesn't add to the objectivity. It's more like adding a veil of pretending it's more objective. So I would argue that, again, that claiming responsibility, I want to be upfront and transparent that, no, this isn't totally objective. Humans were involved and the data didn't analyze themselves. I made analytic decisions that may have affected the results.
All right, there are so many questions. All right, and I can't even keep up with them. Thank you, everyone, for asking all these questions. Where did you start from, Kristin?
I'm just sort of starting. I scrolled down a bit so that we didn't just get the newest questions.
All right, people asking.
I'll read another one, or you got one.
Right. Throat clearing phrases contribute to the structure, cohesion, signposting. I agree. They're asking, do you suggest to cut them all and have a conversational register for the academics? So it's true that this throat clearing, it helps connect ideas. The problem is when you're using it as unnecessarily. Instead of just getting right to the point when you can get right to the point, if you're hemming and hawing and dodging, this is harder for the reader to follow your logic because they're waiting for you to get to the point. And as far as having a conversational register, a conversational tone, I don't think it's important. Rather than thinking about it like that, I try to make sure I'm not trying to sound like I'm smart or impress people, and that I'm just being direct. And I think by being direct, sometimes that comes across as more conversational because we've gotten into all these bad habits. We've been taught that we need to sound intelligent and use big words and lots of them. And when we get rid of that, we're surprised. But I think the sorts of things that Kristin and I wrote are perfectly intelligent, and we sound smart, but we don't sound like we're trying to impress people.
Yeah, totally agree, Regina. And, I think this is one of the reasons people put in these very academic sounding, lots of words. I'll tell you, I'm a reviewer of lots of paper. I spend a lot of time reviewing papers. It does not make me feel like you're smart if you put in a lot of big words. In fact, I get very annoyed as a reviewer that I got to weed through everything in order to understand what you're trying to talk about. And when I was a young scientist, I might have thought, oh, I'm just not smart enough. I don't know enough. It's my fault that I don't understand the abstract. No. I'm older and wiser now. If I don't understand your scientific paper and I'm the reviewer, I know what the problem is with you and not with me. So it won't sound too conversational. Don't worry about that. The other thing I'll add is throat clearing, passive voice. Absolutely. I'm okay with you using something like that if you can tell me why. So when I sit down with students to edit, if they say, oh, yeah, I just threw that in there, not letting you keep it. But if you tell me I put it in passive voice for this reason, or I use that transition for this reason, I'm probably going to let you keep it in. Yeah.
There you go. I think someone was asking about these hedge words. Our results may help explain versus our results explain. So do you want to talk about that, Kristin?
Yeah, I actually like the edit to just say our results explain. The only thing is, just don't put in too many hedge words. And one hedge word of like may is I think fine, because sometimes we don't want to sound like, well, this explains everything, right? And so sometimes a hedge word is okay. Again, if you can tell me why you put the hedge word in, I'll let you keep it. If you just put it in for no reason, or if you put in 7 hedge words, just put may, then I'm not going to let you keep it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, skimming through.
Yeah, I found one from Sikander.
I'm sorry,
we
won't be able to get to everything. So a lot of people asking about first person, point of view, and style. Does this work for a variety of fields? Yes, it does. The sorts of tools and tips that we're giving work, whether it's engineering or nutrition, like Kristin had, or mathematics, all of this works. What else do we have in here?
Sikander asked, most of the time we write almost the same idea and approach in conclusion as done in the abstract. What is the significant difference? So this is a really good question, because we'd encourage you not to repeat. There may be some repetition in your paper where you're going to repeat things in the abstract that you've said in the main paper. That's actually okay, because abstract means to pull out. So what you're doing is you're pulling out little bits and pieces of the paper. So the abstract is going to have some main conclusion, and you're going to repeat that main conclusion in the conclusion section. And that's okay to repeat, because it's expected in those different parts of the paper.
Right. Someone was asking about weak verbs, and what do I mean by weak, or what do we mean by weak verbs? So I think a great example is present an explanation, or provide an explanation of. We don't really need that weak verb provide. The important thing is explain in there, or what was create an obstruction, right? We don't need that create. So present a conclusion, provide an introduction. Those first verbs in there are kind of squishy. They're weak. They're not really doing anything. The important thing is introduce, conclude, abstract, explain.
Yeah, we've got another question about passive voice, and it says, is passive voice, okay to use in the results and discussion? So actually, I would say that I would encourage active voice in the results and the discussion. The one place may be okay to use passive voice is in the methods, and the reason being that in the methods, you want to actually highlight what was done more so than who did it. So I will tend to still put method sections in active voice, because I'm used to writing in the active voice. But if a student puts the methods in passive voice, I'm okay with that too, because it's highlighting what was done as opposed to who did it. Yeah.
But you don't want to be writing passive voice where it's awkward. Sometimes you write yourself into a corner because you're trying to avoid using the we or the I or our team or something like that. So that's where it gets kind of not useful.
A few questions about the analyzing results, which you kept in. It could be, we could have taken the we analyze the results out. I think that's absolutely a good point. Sometimes when we're editing, we keep in a little bit of the author's voice. So we don't, absolutely remove everything. But sure, when the result, we wouldn't necessarily have to say the results were analyzed. That can be assumed. Yeah, good point.
Right. Do we have room for one more? Science engineering papers. Yes, this works for engineering papers. That's why I chose an engineering one, because it was different than Kristin's. And technical stuff works well in there.
And we got another question about, is this abstract style effective both for a presentation and a paper? Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. I would absolutely argue that in giving a talk, you want to use the same kind of rules of thumb, because you want to be concise. You want to be zippy. You don't want to spend a lot of time, trying to sound smart. You want your audience to understand what you're talking about.
Right. You actually sound smarter if you're not trying to impress people with how smart you are. That's my firm belief. Yeah. And someone's asking about word count. So the sorts of tips that we've given here will help with your word count, because you're getting rid of all that clutter and you have room to pack more information in there. Okay. I see that we are at the hour. So I think, so yes, there will be a recording shared later, and I believe that you will have access to the slides and or a PDF. Is there anything else from our sponsors that we should be mentioning in there? All right.
Great. Thanks for all the great questions, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Bye.